A routine visit to the supermarket takes a shocking turn when a racist police officer, blinded by prejudice, misjudges a senior army officer. Convinced she doesn't belong, he escalates a simple misunderstanding into a dangerous confrontation, weapon drawn and arrogance unchecked. But what he doesn't realize is that his target is not just any civilian. She is a highly decorated military officer who has faced far greater threats than an entitled cop on a power trip. By the time the truth comes to light, his badge, his career, and his reputation will be on the line, and the world will be watching. Don't forget to like and comment where you are from. Chapter 1: A simple errand turned nightmare. The supermarket was bustling with the usual late afternoon crowd. Mothers pushed shopping carts filled with groceries, elderly couples debated between brands, and cashiers scanned items with mechanical efficiency. The overhead fluorescent lights buzzed softly, casting a cold glow over the aisles. Lieutenant Colonel Amanda Hayes walked with quiet confidence through the produce section. Dressed in casual clothing, dark jeans, a fitted navy blue sweater, and sneakers, she blended in with the rest of the shoppers. But those who took a closer look would notice her disciplined posture, the sharpness in her gaze, and the quiet authority in the way she moved. Years in the military had molded her into a woman who commanded respect without needing to demand it. Amanda had just returned from a 2-year deployment overseas. Adjusting to civilian life was always strange after long missions, but she had learned to enjoy the small things, like choosing her own groceries instead of eating rations or base food. She picked up a bag of apples, inspecting them with a trained eye, when she noticed a subtle shift in the air. A security guard, positioned near the entrance, was staring at her. At first, she dismissed it. She was used to people watching her, sometimes out of admiration, other times out of curiosity. But this was different. The guard wasn't just watching. He was whispering into his radio. Amanda sighed. Here we go. She continued shopping, ignoring the tension creeping into her muscles. The last thing she wanted was trouble. She had spent years fighting real battles. She had no interest in engaging in petty conflicts born out of ignorance. But trouble, it seemed, had found her anyway. Officer Daniel Wright strode into the store, his presence instantly commanding attention. His uniform was crisp, his belt heavy with gear, and his expression one of barely contained arrogance. Wright was the kind of cop who enjoyed his authority a little too much, especially when he thought he could use it against people who wouldn't fight back. The security guard gestured toward Amanda, whispering something into Wright's ear. The officer's eyes narrowed as he scanned the store, spotting his supposed suspect, a lone black woman, shopping peacefully, minding her own business. Wright's jaw clenched. This doesn't look right. To him, people like her didn't belong in upscale supermarkets like this. Must have been a shoplifting report. He didn't need more information. His bias filled in the blanks. Amanda was reaching for a carton of milk when she heard the heavy footsteps behind her. "Ma'am," a firm voice called out. She turned, meeting Wright's gaze without an ounce of fear. "Yes?" Wright didn't smile. "I need to see your ID." Amanda raised an eyebrow. "Excuse me?" "I said, I need to see some identification." She studied him for a moment. His stance was stiff, his hand resting just above his holster. His eyes carried the quiet aggression of a man who wasn't used to being questioned. Amanda exhaled slowly. "And why would you need that?" "Routine check," Wright replied, his tone clipped. "You were reported as suspicious." Amanda blinked, her expression unimpressed. "Suspicious? How?" Wright's patience thinned. "I'm not going to stand here and argue. Just show me your ID." A few customers had begun to notice the exchange, their whispers filling the space between them. Amanda didn't move. "No, I don't think I will." The defiance in her voice caught Wright off guard. Most people complied the moment he made demands. But this woman, she wasn't intimidated. He stepped closer, voice dropping lower. "Ma'am, I'm giving you a direct order, and I'm giving you an opportunity to rethink your approach," Amanda interrupted, her tone controlled but sharp. The supermarket grew quieter. Even the cashiers hesitated in their scanning. Wright's face darkened. He wasn't used to being challenged, and he didn't like it. Amanda kept her posture relaxed, but inside, her patience was wearing thin. She had spent years dealing with young soldiers who thought their rank made them untouchable. This cop had the same energy, small authority, big ego. She had no interest in entertaining his power trip. "If you're accusing me of something, say it," Amanda said calmly. "Otherwise you're harassing a citizen for no reason." Wright's temper flared. "I'm done playing games," he snapped, reaching for her arm. "You're coming with me." Amanda reacted instinctively. The moment his fingers grazed her wrist, she twisted sharply, breaking his grip in a fluid motion. She stepped back, raising her hands, not in surrender, but in silent warning. A collective gasp rippled through the store. Wright stumbled, regaining his footing, his face turning red with embarrassment. He had never been disarmed so quickly, especially by a woman. His rage overtook reason. His hand shot to his belt, and in a flash, the gun was drawn. The barrel of the gun pointed directly at Amanda's face. The air in the supermarket became suffocatingly thick. Customers froze. A child started crying. Someone whispered, "Oh my God." Amanda didn't move. Her pulse remained steady. Her expression didn't waver. She had stared down the barrels of far deadlier weapons in war zones. This was just another fool with a badge making a mistake he wouldn't be able to take back. Wright's hand trembled slightly, but his voice was steady. "Get on the ground, now." Amanda tilted her head slightly, assessing him like a superior officer evaluating a reckless cadet. Then slowly, she reached into her back pocket. Wright tensed, his finger tightening on the trigger. "Don't move." Amanda didn't stop. She pulled out a leather wallet, flipped it open, and held it up. The gold emblem of the United States Army glinted under the supermarket's fluorescent lights. Lieutenant Colonel Amanda Hayes. The title stared Wright in the face, his own reflection distorted in the badge's polished surface. Silence fell over the store. Wright's expression twisted from fury to disbelief to something dangerously close to regret. Amanda took a single step forward. "You just pointed a gun at a senior officer of the United States Army over a carton of milk." Wright swallowed. Customers murmured among themselves. Some pulled out their phones, recording everything. Amanda lowered her voice, but her words cut like a blade. "Put your weapon down." Wright hesitated. The weight of his mistake was crushing him, his reputation, his career, his future, all in free fall. Then, the unmistakable sound of police sirens filled the air. Someone had called backup. And Wright? He had just lost everything. Chapter 2, When Backup Arrives. The wailing of sirens grew louder, cutting through the suffocating silence of the supermarket. Red and blue lights flickered against the large glass windows, their reflection bouncing off metal shelves and tile floors. Amanda didn't move. She kept her stance firm, her expression unreadable, while Wright stood frozen, his gun still raised. His face was a mixture of shock, fear, and anger. A man who had just realized he had ruined his own life in a single reckless decision. The first officers rushed inside, their weapons drawn, expecting to find a violent suspect. Instead, they found something much worse. A fellow cop, gun in hand, pointing it at a high-ranking military officer. "Drop the weapon," one of the officers shouted. Wright's entire body jerked at the command. His hand trembled, his knuckles white from gripping the gun too tightly. Amanda's voice, calm and authoritative, sliced through the chaos. "You heard them, Officer Wright. Put it down." Wright hesitated. Then, with a shaky breath, he slowly lowered his weapon. His fingers loosened around the grip and finally the gun clattered against the floor. The entire supermarket exhaled. Customers whispered among themselves, some still recording, their phones capturing every moment that would soon flood the internet. A sergeant stepped forward, his expression grim. "Officer Wright, step away from the weapon." Wright obeyed. But Amanda wasn't finished. She reached into her back pocket again, this time pulling out a second item, a simple, worn ID card. She held it up. "Lieutenant Colonel Amanda Hayes, United States Army," she stated, her voice firm and controlled. "I was just unlawfully detained, physically grabbed, and had a gun pointed at my face without cause." The sergeant's expression darkened. Wright flinched. Amanda's next words were colder than steel. "You're going to handle this, now." The sergeant gave a stiff nod. "Officer Wright," he said, turning to his colleague. "Hand over your badge." Wright's eyes widened. "Wait. Now." The finality in the sergeant's voice left no room for argument. The supermarket crowd murmured louder. Some clapped. Others gasped. With shaking hands, Wright reached up and unclipped his badge, his fingers lingering on it for a fraction of a second, as if trying to hold on to the last scrap of his authority. Then he handed it over. His career was officially over. Amanda crossed her arms, watching as the sergeant signaled 2 officers forward. "You're relieved of duty pending investigation," the sergeant continued. "Turn around, hands behind your back." Wright's entire face turned red. "You're arresting me." Amanda's gaze was unwavering. "You pointed a gun at me." The sergeant didn't hesitate. "Yes." The next sound was the unmistakable click of handcuffs snapping shut around Wright's wrists. The once arrogant officer, the man who had walked into the supermarket certain of his power, was now being led out in disgrace. Amanda let out a slow, steady breath. She wasn't done yet. She turned to the sergeant. "I want to file formal charges." The sergeant nodded. "We'll handle it." Amanda's expression didn't change. "See that you do." The cameras were still rolling. And now, this wasn't just a supermarket incident. This was a national story in the making. Chapter 3. The incident goes viral. By the time Amanda left the supermarket, the internet had already done its job. Multiple angles of the confrontation had been uploaded, some shaky and grainy, others crisp and clear. The defining moment, however, was undeniable. A white police officer pointing a gun at a black female senior army officer inside a supermarket without provocation. The footage spread like wildfire. News outlets picked it up within hours. Social media platforms were ablaze with outrage, support, and heated debates. Racist cop pulls a gun on a U.S. Army officer. Watch this. Officer Wright exposed. Why was he even still on the force? Lieutenant Colonel Amanda Hayes responds after nearly being shot by police. Amanda sat in her car outside her apartment, her phone vibrating non-stop. Messages poured in from every direction. Some were from fellow military personnel offering their support. Others were from journalists, all desperate for a statement. And some were threats. She expected that. She had been in this game long enough to know that exposing injustice came with a price. Amanda exhaled, closing her eyes for a moment before picking up her phone. Text from unknown number. "Lieutenant Colonel, we need to talk. I represent legal counsel interested in your case. Call me." She smirked. It hadn't even been a full day and already people wanted to turn this into something bigger. And maybe they were right. Wright sat in a cold, dimly lit holding room, his hands still cuffed. He hadn't spoken a word since they brought him in. The humiliation was unbearable. He had walked into that supermarket thinking he was untouchable, a senior officer, decorated, respected. Now he was just another cop under investigation. The precinct was in chaos. The chief of police had been briefed within minutes of the video going viral. The mayor's office had already sent a formal inquiry. Even state officials were watching, and the decision was swift. The door opened, the chief walked in, his face like stone. "Stand up." Wright obeyed. The chief held up a document. "As of this moment, you are officially terminated from the department." Wright's jaw clenched. "You're firing me? Without even a..." "You pointed a gun at a senior military officer inside a public supermarket." The chief cut him off. "That's not a mistake. That's a career-ending decision." Wright's face turned pale. "This is political. If this wasn't on camera..." "But it was," the chief snapped. "And now we're in the middle of a public relations nightmare." He dropped the final blow. "Pack your things and get out." Wright was led out of the room, his career in tatters. But deep down, he wasn't thinking about the department. He was thinking about Amanda Hayes and how this wasn't over. Chapter 4. Unforgiven. Amanda knew the media storm was only beginning. She had spent years operating under the radar, keeping her head down despite the challenges she had faced as a black woman in the military. But now, Her face was everywhere. Lieutenant Colonel Hayes speaks out. "This is bigger than me." Ex-Officer Wright fired, but is that enough? Military and law enforcement tensions rise after racial profiling incident. She had given a brief statement earlier that day. She had chosen her words carefully. "This is not just about me. This is about a system that continues to allow unchecked bias and abuse of power. I'm grateful to be alive, but too many people in my position never get to tell their side of the story." The internet exploded after that. She had become a symbol. Some called her a hero, others called her a liar. And then there were the death threats. Her inbox was filled with hate, anonymous numbers, social media DMs, emails. "You ruined a good cop's life. You should have just complied. We know where you live." Amanda didn't flinch. She had been threatened before. But this was different because she knew some people weren't just making threats, some were making plans. Wright sat in his apartment, a bottle of whiskey in one hand, his phone in the other. His life was over. No badge, no career, no respect. And it was all because of her. He had read every single comment, every single news article, every single post tearing him apart. His phone rang, an unknown number. He hesitated, then answered. A deep voice on the other end. "You're not the only one who wants payback, Wright." Silence. Then, "We should meet." Amanda walked through the base, the sharp clack of her boots echoing in the hallways. She was back where she belonged, where her rank mattered, where her discipline mattered, where nobody questioned whether she deserved to be here. A fellow officer, Captain Dawson, fell into step beside her. "Heard you had a hell of a week," he said, keeping his voice low. Amanda sighed. "It's not over yet." Dawson stopped walking. "Actually," he said, "it might be getting worse." Amanda turned to him, her jaw tightening. "What do you mean?" Dawson handed her a confidential military briefing. She scanned the first few lines, and her stomach dropped. Wright was missing, his gun was missing, and he had been seen near the base. Chapter 5. Hunted. Amanda's grip tightened around the report. The words on the page blurred slightly as her focus shifted to a singular, undeniable fact. Wright was out there, armed, unstable, and possibly looking for revenge. She took a slow breath, pushing down the instinctive anger that flared in her chest. Dawson was still watching her, waiting for her reaction. "He was seen near the base?" Amanda asked, keeping her voice calm. Dawson nodded. "Not confirmed, but there are reports of a man matching his description loitering near the entrance last night. Security didn't stop him because he didn't do anything suspicious, yet." Amanda clenched her jaw. Wright wasn't just any disgruntled ex-cop. He was trained, experienced, dangerous. And if he was circling the base, it wasn't by accident. Amanda turned on her heel. "Where are you going?" Dawson asked. "To security," she said. "I need to see the footage myself." The security office was dimly lit, the hum of monitors filling the space as Amanda sat beside the officer on duty. "Pull up last night's external cameras," she instructed. The officer typed a few commands, and the grainy black and white footage flickered onto the screen. At first there was nothing, just the usual base traffic, cars passing, soldiers coming and going. Then a figure appeared at the far edge of the frame, a man in dark clothes, hood up, pacing near the outer fence. The timestamp read 03:42 a.m. Amanda leaned in. The man never approached the gate, never did anything overtly suspicious, but the way he moved, his body language, set off alarm bells in her mind. He was waiting for something, or someone. Amanda's pulse slowed, her instincts sharpening. She turned to the officer. "Is there footage of him leaving?" The officer clicked through the files, then frowned. "No," he said. "There's no footage of him leaving at all." Amanda exhaled. So Wright was still out there, watching, waiting. Amanda's phone buzzed. A text message. "Unknown number. You think you're safe on base? You're not." Her muscles tensed. She had received dozens of threats over the past few days. But this one was different. This one meant he was close. Her fingers flew over the screen. "Amanda, come find me then." The response came instantly. "Unknown number. Oh, I will, just not the way you expect." Amanda inhaled slowly. Wright wasn't coming for her. Not directly. He was going to make her pay another way, and she had no idea how. Amanda wasted no time. She stormed into the commanding officer's office. "We need to put the base on alert," she said. Colonel Matthews frowned. "On what grounds?" Amanda tossed her phone onto his desk. He picked it up, scanning the messages. Matthews' face darkened. "This isn't just a disgruntled cop anymore," Amanda said. "Wright is escalating. He's unstable. He's armed. And if he's not coming for me, he's coming for someone close to me." Matthews exhaled sharply. "I can increase security around your barracks," he said, "but officially, we don't have enough to justify locking down the base over a few vague threats." Amanda's fists clenched. This was exactly why these situations spiraled out of control. The system waited until it was too late. Amanda stood, jaw set. "Fine," she said. "Then I'll handle it myself." She turned to leave, and then gunfire erupted from somewhere outside. Amanda froze. Matthews shot to his feet. A voice crackled over the radio on his desk. "Shots fired at the main gate. Repeat, shots fired." Amanda's blood ran cold. She ran. Chapter 6. Under Attack. Amanda sprinted through the corridors, her boots pounding against the concrete as she reached the main exit of the base. The moment she stepped outside, chaos met her head-on. Red emergency lights flashed, sirens wailed. Soldiers were rushing toward the front gate, weapons drawn. The unmistakable crack of gunfire echoed through the air. Amanda grabbed the nearest MP. "What's the situation?" "Shooter outside the main gate," he reported breathlessly. "No confirmed casualties yet, but he's armed and barricaded behind a vehicle." Amanda's gut twisted. It had to be right. She pushed forward, weaving through the defensive line until she had a clear view of the road outside the base. A black SUV was parked at an angle near the entrance, blocking part of the road. The windshield was shattered, and smoke curled from the engine. Behind it, a figure crouched low, holding a rifle. Amanda's stomach tightened. It was him, James Wright. Amanda grabbed a megaphone from one of the MPs and stepped forward, keeping her hands raised. "Wright!" she called out. "This ends now!" Silence. Then, a laugh, low, mocking. Wright leaned out from behind the SUV, his face partially illuminated by the emergency lights. His eyes were wild, but his mouth was curled in an infuriating smirk. "You finally came out to see me, Major." His voice was taunting. "I was beginning to think you were hiding." Amanda ignored the bait. "Put the weapon down. This doesn't have to go any further." Wright chuckled. "Oh, but it does," he said. "Because you took everything from me." Amanda's fingers curled into fists. "You did that to yourself." Wright's smile vanished. A sudden gunshot exploded from his rifle. Bang! Amanda barely dodged, diving behind a Humvee as the bullet ricocheted off the metal. The MPs immediately returned fire, forcing Wright back behind his cover. The situation was deteriorating fast. Amanda knew how this would end. Either Wright surrendered, or he wouldn't walk away from this alive. Amanda's mind raced. Wright was outnumbered, surrounded. There was no way out. So why was he stalling? Unless... Her eyes flickered to the SUV, the way it was positioned, the damage to the engine, the wires dangling from the dashboard. Amanda's blood turned to ice. "Bomb!" she shouted. The MPs hesitated for a fraction of a second, then scattered as Amanda took off running. Wright grinned. "Too late, Major," he sneered. "You wanted a war? Let's finish it." He reached for a detonator. Amanda had one chance. She drew her pistol. Bang! The bullet hit Wright's hand, sending the detonator flying. He screamed, clutching his shattered fingers as the device skidded across the pavement. Amanda didn't stop. She tackled him hard, slamming him into the ground. His gun fell. His body hit the concrete, but he wasn't done. With his uninjured hand, Wright swung at her, knocking her off balance. Amanda hit the ground, her breath forced from her lungs. Wright scrambled for the detonator. Amanda grabbed his collar and slammed his face into the pavement. Crack! Blood sprayed. Wright went limp. Amanda panted, pressing her forearm against his throat. His body twitched once, then stopped. The fight was over. Seconds later, MPs swarmed the area, pulling Wright's unconscious body off the ground. Amanda pushed herself up, still catching her breath. She turned toward the SUV. The bomb squad was already moving in. She watched as they examined the explosive device. One of them shook his head. "Live wires," he muttered. Another second, and he would have blown half the gate open. Amanda exhaled slowly. Too close. Matthews arrived, looking livid. "Jesus Christ, Amanda. Are you trying to give me a heart attack?" Amanda wiped the blood from her lip. "I got him, didn't I?" Matthews shook his head. "Yeah, you got him." He looked over at the MPs dragging Wright's body into a transport van. That bastard's never seeing daylight again. Amanda hoped that was true, but deep down she knew this wasn't over. Not really, because people like Wright, they never let go of their hate. Chapter 7. A war far from over. The next morning, Amanda stood in the base's command center, staring at the files spread across the table. Wright was in custody. The bomb had been disarmed. The crisis was over. At least, that's what everyone wanted to believe. But Amanda knew better. Hate like his doesn't disappear overnight. And the people who enabled him, they were still out there. Wright sat in the interrogation room, his wrists cuffed to the metal table. His face was swollen from the fight, his broken hand wrapped in bandages. But his eyes, they still burned with pure hatred. Amanda stepped inside, shutting the door behind her. She didn't sit, didn't speak, just stood there, watching him. Wright smirked. "Oh, Major," he drawled. "Come to gloat?" Amanda didn't react. "Who helped you?" Wright laughed. "Helped me? You think I needed help?" She leaned forward, placing both hands on the table. "You don't have the resources to pull something like this off alone," she said coolly. "So, who backed you?" Wright grinned wider. "You still don't get it, do you?" he said. "This isn't just about me." Amanda's stomach tightened. He was stalling, which meant the real threat was still out there. An hour later, Amanda stormed into Matthew's office, slamming a file onto his desk. "We need to talk," she said. Matthews frowned, flipping it open. Inside were documents, surveillance photos, and classified reports. Amanda tapped a specific page. A bank transfer. Wright was getting funded, she explained, and this money, it's not from some lone extremist. This is organized. Matthews exhaled sharply. "Tell me you have a lead." Amanda nodded. "I do." She flipped to the next page, a photo of a high-ranking officer. Matthews' face went pale. "Tell me this is a mistake," he muttered. Amanda's voice was ice cold. "It's not." The photo belonged to Colonel Richard Lawson, a decorated officer, a respected leader, and the real mastermind behind Wright's attack. Amanda tapped the report. Wright was just the weapon. Lawson was the one aiming him. Matthews cursed. "We have enough to bring him in?" "Not yet," Amanda admitted, "but we will." She closed the file. "I'll make sure of it." That evening, Amanda found Lawson in the officers' mess hall. He was calm, smiling, like a man with nothing to fear. She sat across from him, setting the file on the table. Lawson raised an eyebrow. "Major Carter, to what do I owe this honor?" Amanda kept her voice level. "I know what you did," Lawson chuckled. "You're going to have to be more specific." Amanda slid the file toward him. "Wright was your pawn." Lawson's expression never changed. He glanced at the file, then closed it and smiled. "You have no idea what you're getting yourself into," he murmured. Amanda held his gaze. "And you have no idea who you just pissed off." That night, Amanda's phone buzzed. A blocked number, she answered. A distorted voice whispered through the speaker, "Walk away, Major, before you disappear." Click. The line went dead. Amanda stared at the phone, her heartbeat steady, her resolve unshaken. They wanted her to stop. They wanted her to be afraid. But Amanda Carter, she never backed down from a fight, especially not one she knew she could win. Chapter 8. The fight begins now. The next morning, Amanda Carter walked into the base with a new mission. This wasn't about Wright anymore. This wasn't even about Lawson. This was about something bigger, because corruption wasn't just a person. It was a system. And Amanda? She was about to tear it down. The investigation into Lawson should have been straightforward. But it wasn't. Every request Amanda sent for files, records, bank statements, denied, delayed, buried. Someone was protecting him, someone higher up, and when she pushed harder, she got pulled into Matthew's office. Matthews looked exhausted. "Amanda," he sighed, rubbing his temples. "You need to drop this." She stared. "Are you ordering me to back off?" Matthews's jaw tightened. "I'm telling you, there are forces here you don't understand." Amanda leaned forward. "I understand plenty," she said. "I understand that we have a racist terrorist in custody, a corrupt colonel funding him, and a system protecting them both." Matthews exhaled. "You think this is just about them?" Amanda's eyes narrowed. "What are you saying?" Matthews hesitated, then said two words that sent a chill down her spine. "It's bigger." Amanda had a choice: walk away or expose it all. She made her decision instantly. That night, she met with Serena Torres, an investigative journalist she had trusted for years. She handed over everything: the files, the surveillance footage, the financial records. Serena's eyes widened as she flipped through the evidence. "This is," she whispered, "this is career-ending." Amanda's voice was steady. "No," she corrected, "this is nation-shaking." Serena looked up. "Are you sure about this?" Amanda didn't hesitate. "Print it." The next morning, the world woke up to headlines that shook the military to its core. Breaking news: high-ranking officer exposed in racist military scandal. Widespread corruption allegations emerge after leaked documents. Congress demands investigation into systemic racism within armed forces. Amanda sat in her car, watching the coverage. Her heart pounded. She had done it. The truth was out. Now, she just had to survive the fallout. Lawson was removed from command within hours. Investigations launched. Matthews resigned. And Amanda, she was called into a final meeting. With generals, senators, high-ranking officials. She walked in alone, sat down and waited. The most powerful man in the room folded his hands and studied her. "You realize what you've done?" he asked. Amanda met his gaze, unflinching. "I did my job," she said. Silence. Then, a slow, approving nod. "You're a dangerous woman, Major Carter," Amanda smirked. "Then you should be very afraid." She left the meeting without a job, without a rank, without a uniform. They had pushed her out. But she wasn't defeated, because the real fight wasn't fought in offices. It was fought in the streets, in the courts, in the public eye. And Amanda Carter, she wasn't done. Not by a long shot. Amanda Carter may have lost her career, but she won something greater, a battle that mattered, a legacy that would never be erased, and a promise that the next time someone in power thought they could abuse it, she'd be there, watching, waiting, and ready to burn it all down again. Would you have risked everything like Amanda? Drop a comment below and let us know. If you made it to the end, smash that like button, and if you believe in stories that expose the truth, hit subscribe. The content is fictitious and does not reflect reality or encourage negative behavior.